In this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a $42 Lurrus of the Dream Den Commander deck. Let's get started. Total cost of this deck was just under $42 as of the day of recording. Prices were checked using mtgstocks.com. Do note that prices fluctuate, so they may be above or below where you see them listed at in this video. And this deck is 1DH legal, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the commander, who can be up to $5. Our commander for this deck is Lurrus of the Dream Den, a 3-to-cast 3/2 that has companion, although we are going to ignore that portion because we are not using Lurrus as a companion. Lurrus is going to be our general. Lurrus has lifelink, but more importantly says, during each of your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. We're going to mostly try and key on that, get a lot of card advantage off of Lurrus's second ability, allowing us to cast an extra card each turn. The strategy for this deck is to kind of turtle shell up, so we're going to run a lot of death touchers and other cards that deter our opponents from trying to attack into us. We want to protect ourselves as well as our permanents that are on the battlefield, and then extort, or use the extort effect to drain our opponents out, and then just overwhelm our opponents with just tons of resources. To start off, we're going to talk about the Accelerants in the deck. We are running 7 of them. We have a couple of mana dorks in the Gold Mirror and Leaden Mirror, which give us 2 of our colors, 1 each respectively, as well as the Guardian Idol, which helps ramp us out, but can also be a great chump blocker if we need it. Additionally, we have the Talisman of Hierarchy, which gives us a colorless or taps for either of our colors, and the Everflowing Chalice, which I usually just kick 1 time, but has the potential to be kicked multiple times, giving us an even greater payoff. Lastly, for mana rocks, we have the Orzhov Locket and the Orzhov Cluestone, both of which can tap for both of our colors, but also we can pay a little mana and sacrifice them to draw some cards. Next up, we're getting into our game plan. We have 16 cards specific to our game plan. As I said, we're going to be running lots of death touchers, such as the Fetid Imp, Mire Triton, and Orzhov Enforcer. The Triton is doubly good because it mills us a little bit, giving us more card selection for Lurrus. And the Orzhov Enforcer is cool because it gives us a body even after it dies. Gifted Aetherborn and Eily, Eternal Pilgrim, give us a couple more death touchers that we can reanimate with Lurrus. Eily also helps us in that she allows us to sacrifice creatures that we want to recast with Lurrus, gives us a little bit of life gain. And if we're really ahead, with the life total padded to 50, we can just use her to sack things and exile our opponent's non-land permanents. Really good getting into the late game if you're getting out in front. And then Vampire Nighthawk, which we can't reanimate with Lurrus, but is a 2/3 flyer with Death Touch and Lifelink. Then we also want to protect Lurrus, make sure that Lurrus, if it would be removed, we're able to get it back easily. So we have Kaya's Ghost Form, Angelic Renewal, and No Rest for the Wicked. We also want to protect Lurrus with Hexproof, so we have the Mask of Avacyn as well as the Mirror Shield, both of which give an additional 2 toughness, which surprisingly protected me from quite a few of those smaller red-type wrath effects that deal 3D damage or less to all the creatures on the battlefield. Once we've kind of protected ourselves, we've turtle shelled up, we want to get out cards that extort, such as the Thrall Parasite, Syndic of Ties, or the Basilica Screecher. All these extort cards allow us to dump extra mana into the cheap cards that we're reanimating, allowing us to drain out our opponents, putting them that much closer to death. A couple more extort creatures, we have the Tithe Drinker and the Knight of Obligation. The Knight of Obligation comes with Vigilance, so it allows us to get in for chip damage if our opponents leave themselves open. Next up, we're going to talk about cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan. We have 20 of them. Most of them we're able to recur, get back over again with Lurrus, so that we can reuse them again, which can put our opponents really behind, especially once we get down to just 1 or 2 opponents. To start off, we have a couple more deterrents, such as the Soul Snare and Pit Trap, both of which can remove creatures that are attacking us. The Pit Trap can only hit grounded creatures, so it can't get flyers, but does come with the upside of being able to hit creatures that are also attacking our opponents. So you can sometimes surprise people that way, getting rid of a really big piece that you need off of the table, as long as it's attacking anybody. Citywide Busts is a pseudo board wipe in that it destroys all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. The majority of our creatures are not in that realm, Because we get to time when we cast this, you should be able to remove quite a few of your opponent's creatures while leaving yours on the table. The concoction helps us turn our dead cards into removal spells and also mills us, so it gives us better card selection for Lurrus. Deadly the Designs is just a great place to dump a bunch of mana, and then we can time when we put that last plot counter on it, destroying 2 creatures, and then the capsule will only hit non-black creatures for us. For more creature removal, we have Ob Nixilis, which turns into card draw if it's able to stick around, which is not too hard if we're turtle shelling up. Unmake and Dire Tactics both exile our opponent's creatures. Dispeller's Capsule and Seal of Cleansing can destroy artifacts or enchantments, and the Felidar Cub can destroy an enchantment for us. Bounty Agent, Despark, and Mortify help us get multiple kinds of permanents. The Agent usually hits our opponent's commanders. Despark can get anything with a CMC of 4 or greater, and then Mortify can destroy creatures or enchantments. Deathbringer Regent, Rout, and Kaya's Wrath give us ways to wipe the board of all creatures if the game gets a little bit too out of control for us. Regent leaves us with a big flyer. Rout comes with the upside of being able to cast it at instant speed, and Kaya's Wrath is typically going to give us a little bit of life gain. Gatekeeper Malakir is a 2/2 that we're able to kick for 3 mana and force an opponent to sacrifice a creature. This is a great reanimation target for Lurrus, as its CMC is 2 or less, but then that kicker cost is not included. Although you're going to be paying 3 mana, you can still target it with Lurrus, bringing it back again and again, forcing opponents to sacrifice creatures. An even better sacrifice effect is on Martyr's Bond. Anytime one of our non-land permanents goes to the graveyard, each of our opponents has to sacrifice a card of the same type. With our ability to sacrifice things and chump block with little things, come in for chip damage, you can really pin your opponents into difficult positions with this on the table. Butcher of Malakir does the same, but only for creatures, but it does come on a 5/4 flyer, so you can get in for some good flying damage there. Lastly, for interference, we have Nihil's Spellbomb, which allows us to remove our opponent's graveyards, and if nothing else, you can continue to bring this back with Lurrus, and as long as you pay a black when you sacrifice it, you're going to draw a card. So for 2 mana, draw a card if you don't have anything else going on. Makes for a great way to churn through your deck. Next up, we're going to talk about cards that provide us consistency. We are running 14 of them in this deck. To start off, we have the Midnight Reaper and Grim Haruspex, both of which draw us cards anytime our creatures die. A great card that combos with that is the Smothering Abomination, because it's going to allow us to sacrifice things we want to bring back with Lurrus anyway. When we sacrifice those creatures, we're drawing a card. If you have either one of the Reaper or Haruspex out, you're drawing 2 cards, so it can really start to snowball you into an advantageous position. Similar are the Bygone Bishop and Mentor of the Meek, but instead of when our creatures die, it's when they enter. So you bring something back with Lurrus. It's a small thing with a CMC of 3 or less, or power 2 or less. You're either going to be able to investigate or put an extra 1 into it to draw a card. One of those kinds of cards that you could be putting out is the Foulmire Knight, a 1/1 with Death Touch, which could have gone under our game plan because it's a Death Toucher, helps protect us that way. But I put it under consistency because I'm usually going to send it on an adventure, drawing a card and losing a life before I pay that 1 to get a 1/1 Death Toucher on the table. Next up, we have Underworld Connections, which draws us a card for the cost of a life and a mana every single turn. Indulgent Tormentor, which doesn't necessarily draw us cards, but most of the time the Tormentor is just applying extra pressure to our opponents because cards are good for us, loss of life for our opponents is good for us, as well as them sacrificing creatures. One of the best cards in the deck is the Gravebreaker Lamia, because it has the ability to tutor a card to our graveyard. Most of the time I was tutoring a protection piece, such as Kaya's Ghost Form. That way I was able to protect Lurrus more easily, and then I could bring that piece back every single time. So really good. It also makes the spells we cast from our graveyard cost 1 less. So if I am casting a 2 CMC card, it costs 1 generic less, so anything you're casting will only cost 1 as long as it has a generic in the cost. Then of course there's Lurrus, who is really a big piece in this deck, which was why protecting it is so big. However, we do have Palace Siege, which can act as a replacement if Lurrus has been removed too many times. As long as we choose Khans, we get to return a creature from our graveyard to our hand at the beginning of each upkeep. You can also choose Dragons, which will help with the drain effect if you've got so much card draw going on. A Darkar Valkyrie is great because we're going to be removing a lot of our opponent's creatures, assuming they play creatures, and this allows us to kind of steal them in effect. Lastly, we have the Omen of the Dead and Restoration Specialist, which we can recur with Lurrus, but they allow us to get back creatures, artifacts, or enchantments regardless of the CMC of that spell. Next up, we're going to talk about the lands in the deck. We are running 41 of them. First off, we have Mistvale Plains, which you can use to put any card on the bottom of your library. That way, after you've gotten a shuffle effect, you have a better chance of drawing that card. I was usually using this on my instants of sorceries. We also have Mortuary Mire and Witch's Cottage, which help us to put creatures back on top of our library so that we can draw them and cast them again. Myriad Landscape helps ramp us out, while Field of Ruin allows us to destroy problematic lands our opponents are playing. And then we have Warped Landscape, which allows us to fetch a basic of any type to our battlefield tapped, helping us to thin our deck, but can also tap for a colorless. For some further land fixing and deck thinning, we have Ash Barrens, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse. And then for both of our colors, we have Command Tower, Caves of Koilos, Forsaken Sanctuary, Orzhov Guildgate, Scoured Barrens, Shambling Vent, Tainted Field, Orzhov Basilica, and the Temple of Silence. As for basics, we are running 15 Swamps and 8 Plains. Average converted mana cost of this deck was 2.54. There you can see the mana curve. Very 1 and 2 drop heavy, simply because that gives us more targets for Lurrus. Keys to victory. We really want to make sure we maximize our mana. We have a lot of things that don't cost much, but with the ability to extort and our ability to draw cards, we want to make sure we're using as much of our mana as we can each and every turn. Also, try not to overcommit. If you don't have protection pieces for Lurrus, try not to put Lurrus on the table unless you have nothing else going on. This did happen to me a couple of times. I played out my stuff because I have so many cards that cost 1 or 2. I didn't have a lot else going on, so I put Lurrus out there without any protection, and then he would typically get removed. Then you put him out for 5, and then when you're putting him out for 7, it really hurts. So try not to overcommit to the board. There's gonna probably be a board wipe at some point. So try to just stick it out as long as you can until you can get that protection piece. Lastly, try really hard to protect Lurrus. He's a very vital part to this deck, and also to protect your life total. It's really tempting to get in for little bits of damage here and there, but you're better off leaving those small creatures back as chump blockers or trade blockers if they're death touchers. Here are a few cards I would consider if I were to go above that $1 price point. If you want to see some more ideas, check out the link in the description below. Better yet, share your thoughts in the comments what card you would upgrade with. That way, others can see your brilliant ideas and alter to their liking. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any of the new weekly content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right or either of the playlists on the bottom.